The sun was setting behind the wide hills of Montana when a tired rancher named Jack stumbled upon something he would never forget. It had been a long day for him, fixing fences, feeding the cattle, and checking the water supply before nightfall. The wind was cold, and the evening air carried the scent of dry grass and earth. He was about to head home when he heard a faint sound coming from the old trail near the riverbed. It was soft at first, almost like the wind, but then he realized it was a voice, a woman's voice. Jack stopped and listened carefully. "Let me die here," the voice whispered again. His heart skipped a beat. He followed the sound, pushing through the tall grass until he found someone lying near a fallen tree, a young woman, her clothes covered in dust and her face pale. She looked exhausted, as if she had walked for miles without rest. Her eyes were half open, staring at nothing, and her lips trembled with weakness. "Miss, can you hear me?" Jack asked gently, kneeling beside her. She tried to speak but only managed a faint sound. Jack quickly took off his coat and placed it around her shoulders. He could see that she had been through something terrible, but there was no time for questions. He needed to get her help. He lifted her carefully, surprised by how light she was. As he carried her back toward his horse, he noticed strange marks on her arms, like scratches from branches, and her shoes were torn apart. Whoever she was, she must have traveled through the woods for hours. When he reached his horse, he laid her gently across the saddle and started the long ride back to his ranch. The ride was slow and rough. The moon was rising and the land looked silver under its light. Jack kept talking to her, hoping she would stay awake. "You're safe now," he said softly. "Just hang on a little longer." She murmured something he couldn't understand, her voice weak and trembling. When they reached the ranch, Jack carried her inside and placed her on the couch near the fire. He lit a lantern and finally got a clear look at her face. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, with dark hair tangled with dust and leaves. Her skin was cold and she looked frightened even in her sleep. Jack fetched a blanket, warmed some water, and carefully cleaned her hands and face. After a few minutes, she opened her eyes again. "Where am I?" she whispered. "You're at my ranch," Jack said quietly. "You were lying near the river. You're safe now." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't think anyone would find me," she said softly. Jack handed her some warm water to drink. "You've been through a lot. Don't try to talk too much. Just rest." She nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she held the cup. For a while there was only silence. The crackling fire filled the room and Jack watched her with concern. He had seen storms, sickness, and even wildfires in his life, but nothing had ever made him feel this kind of worry for a stranger. After a long pause, she finally spoke again. "My name is Sarah," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to come this far, I just ran until I couldn't anymore." Jack didn't press her for details. He could see the pain in her eyes. "You can rest here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what you need." But as she drifted into sleep, something caught Jack's attention. When he went to cover her with another blanket, his eyes fell on her wrist. There was a small piece of cloth tied tightly around it, almost like a bandage. He carefully loosened it to check if she was hurt, and froze in shock. Underneath the cloth was not a wound, but a strange symbol marked into her skin. It wasn't fresh, but it looked old and deliberate, something that had been there for a long time. Jack couldn't understand what it meant, but he knew it wasn't something ordinary. He quickly covered it again, deciding not to mention it until she was strong enough to talk. He sat by the fire most of the night, keeping watch while she slept. Every now and then she murmured in her sleep, names, places, and broken sentences that made no sense. Jack listened, trying to piece together her story, but it was impossible. The next morning, sunlight filled the small cabin. Sarah woke up slowly, blinking as if she didn't remember where she was. When she saw Jack making breakfast, she looked surprised but also relieved. "You didn't have to help me," she said quietly. Jack smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but I couldn't leave you there." For a while, they sat in silence. Then she said something that made him pause. "You shouldn't have brought me here. They'll come looking for me." Jack turned slowly. "Who will?" Sarah looked down, her fingers trembling around the cup of tea he'd given her. "The people I ran from." Her voice broke as she said it, and Jack realized this was no simple case of someone getting lost. Something much deeper and darker was hidden behind those tired eyes. He wanted to ask more, but before he could, Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "I just wanted to disappear," she whispered. "That's why I said to leave me there. I thought it was over. Jack stood still, unsure what to say. He wasn't a man used to comforting others. Life on the ranch had made him tough and quiet. But now he felt something stir in his heart, a mix of protectiveness and curiosity. Whoever she was, she needed help, and he was the only one around to give it. Outside, the wind began to blow again, carrying the sound of the open plains. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called out. Jack looked out the window, his instincts telling him that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. He didn't know who Sarah really was or what she had escaped from, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever she was running from hadn't given up yet, and soon, that quiet ranch might no longer be a place of safety at all. The next morning began quietly. The sun rose over the wide land, painting the sky with soft orange light. Jack stepped outside, fed the horses, and checked the fence line, but his mind wasn't on the chores. He kept thinking about the young woman asleep in his cabin, the one who had whispered that she wanted to die, the one who had said they would come looking for her. When he walked back to the house, Sarah was awake and sitting near the fire, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. She looked better but still tired, her eyes heavy from lack of sleep. She was staring at the flames as if they held all the memories she wanted to forget. Jack poured her a cup of coffee and placed it beside her. "You look a little stronger today," he said softly. She nodded slowly. "I am. Thank you for everything, Jack." "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "Just tell me if you're in some kind of danger. You said they'll come for you." "Who are they?" Sarah looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "I worked at a place outside the next town," she said. It was a small farmhouse. At first, everything seemed fine, but after a few weeks, I started noticing strange things. People coming and going at odd hours, whispering, hiding boxes in the barn. When I asked questions, they told me to stay quiet. She stopped for a moment and took a deep breath. "One night I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. I can't tell you everything, but it was bad. I ran away that same night. They followed me for miles and I thought they'd catch me. I kept running until I collapsed near the river." Jack listened carefully. The more she talked, the more serious it sounded. "Do you think they know you're here?" he asked. Sarah shook her head. "I don't think so, but if they find out, they won't stop." Jack's jaw tightened. "Then they'll have to go through me first." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand, Jack. These aren't normal people. They have power and money. They can find anyone." Jack sat down across from her. "I don't care who they are. You're safe here. No one knows about this ranch except me and the supply driver who comes once a week. You'll be fine." Sarah smiled weakly, but Jack could see the fear still hidden behind her eyes. She didn't argue, but he knew she didn't believe she was safe. The days passed slowly. Sarah began helping around the ranch, feeding chickens, mending clothes, and cooking meals. Her color returned, and she even smiled sometimes. Jack found himself talking more than he had in years. The quiet woman who had once whispered that she wanted to die was beginning to come back to life. But the peace didn't last long. One evening, while Jack was fixing the gate near the main road, he noticed something strange, tire tracks that weren't there before. His ranch was far from town and no one visited without a reason. He knelt down to look closer. The tracks were fresh, maybe from that morning. When he returned to the cabin, Sarah saw his worried face immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Someone's been out here," he said. "Maybe they were just passing by, but I don't take chances." Sarah's hands trembled. "They found me," she whispered. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't jump to that yet. Let's stay calm. If anyone comes, we'll handle it." That night, neither of them slept much. Jack kept his lantern by the window and his old hunting rifle nearby, not to harm anyone, but to scare off trouble if it came. Sarah sat by the fire, her eyes full of worry. Every sound outside made her flinch. The wind howled through the empty land, and the creaking of the wooden house felt louder than ever. Hours passed. Just as the first light of dawn touched the sky, there was a faint knock on the door. Jack froze. Sarah's face went pale. "Don't open it," she whispered. Jack held up a hand for silence and moved carefully toward the door. "Who's there?" he called out. A voice answered, calm and friendly. "Morning, sir. My truck broke down near the road. Could I borrow some tools?" Jack hesitated. The man's voice sounded normal, but something about it felt off. He opened the door just a crack. A stranger stood outside, tall, dressed neatly and smiling. But his eyes, Jack noticed, were sharp and cold. "Tools?" Jack asked. "Yes, sir. Just a wrench or two. Won't take long." Jack nodded slowly. "Wait here." He closed the door and turned to Sarah. Her hands were shaking. "That's one of them," she whispered. "I recognize his voice." Jack felt a chill go down his spine. He looked toward the window. The man was still there, but now he wasn't smiling. He was looking around the yard, scanning the barn and stables like someone searching for something. Jack made a quick decision. "Go out the back," he told Sarah. "Take the path behind the shed and stay low. Head toward the hills. Don't stop until I come for you." Sarah shook her head. "No, Jack, you'll be in danger." "Go," he said firmly. "Now." She hesitated only for a second before slipping out the back door into the tall grass. Jack took a deep breath, opened the front door wider, and faced the man again. "I don't have any tools," he said calmly. "You should keep moving. Town's only 5 miles east." The man tilted his head, studying Jack. "You sure? You look like a man who keeps a lot of things handy." Jack didn't move. "I'm sure." There was silence for a moment. Then the stranger smiled again. "If you see a young woman around here about this tall dark hair, let us know. She's missing and her family's worried." Jack met his eyes. "Haven't seen anyone." The man nodded slowly. "Well then, you take care." He turned and walked back to his truck parked near the road. Jack watched until he drove off. But even after the sound of the engine faded, he knew this wasn't over. When Jack went to look for Sarah, she was waiting at the edge of the hill, her face pale but relieved to see him. "Did he leave?" she asked. "For now," Jack said. "But they'll be back. We can't stay here." Sarah looked around at the wide open land. "Where will we go?" Jack thought for a moment. "I know a friend who owns a cabin up north near the woods. No one goes there. We'll leave at dawn." The next morning they packed what little they had, food, water, and blankets, and rode off before sunrise. The air was cold and mist hung low over the ground. Sarah didn't speak much, but Jack could tell she was scared. Hours passed before they reached the woods. The place was quiet and peaceful, far from any road. They settled inside the small cabin, and for the first time in days, Sarah looked calm. "Do you think they'll stop looking for me?" she asked softly. Jack looked out the window at the tall trees. "Maybe not," he said. "But as long as I'm here, they won't find you." Sarah smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you, Jack. You saved me twice." Jack looked at her and said quietly, "You saved yourself, Sarah. You just needed someone to remind you how." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying away the echoes of fear and pain. For the first time since that terrible night near the river, Sarah felt peace in her heart. She wasn't the same broken woman who had whispered, "Let me die here." She had found a reason to live again, and someone who believed she deserved to.